during Trump's inauguration when he did the sea cows. Okay, hail! He did two big sea cows. Like, that is literally, he took it to the most extreme and then sat back to see what the response was. And the response was, well, you had people like Piers Morgan saying anyone who said he was Sikh Highland is an idiot. Yeah, so that was the media response. The media response was to dive to his defense and tell everybody who saw him doing an open fascist salute that they were idiots. Yeah, this is why he's making these speeches now. This is why he's inciting violence, because he's realized, hey, I can just about do anything and get away with it.
If you knew what you were made of, then we would save the world.
What's going on, people? Welcome to another King Mono show. And today we're going to discuss a character that I really and truly despise. He could be, well, he's definitely in my top three. I'm just deciding whether or not he sits at the top, but he doesn't. I think Bill Gates still sits above him. Elon Musk, I think, is one of the most despicable, disgusting, and repugnant individuals that I truly believe exists on this planet. I'm not going to give too much of a biography, but essentially he descends from an apartheid lineage, and he's now fully moved into his position as being an apartheid racist separatist. And honestly, he blindsided me, because the honest truth is, and I seem to be a bit naive because I keep doing this, I did this with Trump as well, I initially quite liked Elon Musk when he was just doing his whole, entrepreneur thing and his whole Tony Stark impression. I actually found it quite, becoming. I actually thought it was quite, I thought he was quite a cool character. I thought he was just about tech and didn't have any of these kind of like political ideologies. And I actually found him quite pleasant, to be honest with you. I liked his companies. I thought PayPal was a good company. I didn't know about how he grifted his way into Tesla. I thought he actually was involved in the founding of Tesla. I didn't realize he was just this kind of like fake funder who essentially was creating a false image around himself. I thought he actually was a part of founding these organizations. So I thought this guy is very innovative. He's very creative, and I liked him. And then the turn, really, I don't know when this happened, because I think other people came back to me and was like, no, Elon Musk has always been like this. And I was like, how did I not see this? He's just turned into the most vile, disgusting, anti-black racist that I think exists on the planet. He's actually horrendous. And the difference between Elon Musk's racism and maybe like other people's kind of like racism, it's like people like who are just like, I'm racist or I don't care, like a Tommy Robinson, for instance. They've never offended me because they kind of wear their kind of like beliefs out on their sleeve, and in many ways they're kind of ethnocentric. And I'm like, cool, you be ethnocentric, I'll be ethnocentric. That's no harm, What I don't like about people like Elon Musk is he's essentially going around the world trying to incite racial violence, trying to incite the erasure and genocides of people like me for no reason, other than the fact that we have this skin, and obviously, racism runs deep, and essentially that it's an ideology that's based on a psychological condition, that's based on jealousy, it's based on envy, it's based on wanting, it's based on fear. And so we know we have all of these psychological conditions that essentially kind of underpin what becomes racist behavior. But Elon Musk just takes it to another level. And what's more scary is he has the financial capabilities, such as Reform UK's success is linked to Elon Musk's direct financial backing. So we got this crazed fascist with unlimited financial capabilities going around the world and creating this kind of like his ideology of basically creating apartheid states across Europe and across America and across the world. It's vile, it's scary, and the bottom line of this video is he needs to be arrested. He needs to be arrested because it's now provable and documented that he has interfered in the politics of foreign nations on multiple occasions, which I thought was illegal. I mean, weren't they going to send Trump to prison for having Russia's backing, even though I think all of that was a nonsense, but weren't they going to send him to prison for that? Haven't we all heard about tampering of elections and, other nations, China, Russia, being involved in the elections of outside nations? And yet Elon Musk is openly funding political parties of countries he has got nothing to do with. He might as well be funding coups. He's inciting racial violence through his influence on social media. He's trying to get people to, trying to create uprisings within nations. He's trying to start civil wars. It's illegal. It should be illegal. He shouldn't be immune. He shouldn't have impunity from prosecution because he's rich. This guy needs to be arrested. He's a dangerous individual. I truly despise him. And I hope we can start talking with this rhetoric a bit more, rather than kind of like, oh, I don't like Elon Musk, this, that, and the other. I think we should start to put out the energy to get this guy arrested. I want this guy arrested. I want him prosecuted. I think, governments around the world, South African government, for instance, rather than, gently kind of like, trying to get on with this guy or trying to, have diplomacy with him, the South African government should be trying to get this guy arrested. They should be calling for his arrest. If more nations start calling for the arrest of Elon Musk, like in Germany, for instance, where he tried to incite racial violence there and he backs the fascists there, if more nations across the world call for this guy's arrest, then at the very least he'll be less brazen. But anyway, that's kind of my preamble out of the way. Let's get into this video so you can see one of the many reasons why I think this guy essentially needs to go. I'm pulling this video from a channel called LBC, which I don't like, by the way. It's kind of like I don't like this channel, but James O'Brien occasionally comes good. This is a guy, he's kind of like a bit of a kind of central / left leaning commentator, and he's very plain speaking. But I think I heard some stuff on this. I can't remember. It's a couple of weeks old now, so I haven't watched it recently. But I'm going to kind of like react to what he's talking about here in regards to Elon Musk crossing the line. It's called Musk Crossed a Line this weekend. James O'Brien on the right wing rally. Let's give it a go.
This is true of the left and the right. Someone is really rich. They believe they should be above the rules and regulations, the requirements and traditions that the rest of us must live by. You don't have to be rich. You could just be sociopathic. You remember those comments that Boris Johnson...
So understatement of the year, by the way, in the UK, it's not a case of, just, to abide by. It's laws. There are laws in place, laws that people have to abide by. Otherwise, they get arrested and they lose their freedom. Yeah. Wealth should not protect you from that. And obviously in the UK, wealth will protect you from anything, particularly if you're of a certain political class. You're essentially, can operate with total impunity and totally trounce the laws that you even write. The laws that you've recently put in place, such as we had the lockdown laws during 2020, which were flaunted by the entire government. The entire government should have been disbanded and replaced. I think the Queen and the royal family still has the ability to do that in the UK, to replace the government. I think they operated in a manner which seriously called for that to be the case. It wasn't even brought into question. This is like, yes, we made a law. Yes, we all broke the law. And no, we don't care what you think.
Because I was on Have I Got News For You a long time ago. And I knew very little about Elon Musk that week. I think it was just the space stuff that he was doing long before he bought Twitter and turned it into a sewer. And I described...
And Elon Musk turning Twitter into a sewer is a bit of a running joke now, but it really, that platform is literally unusable. I've never been a massive Twitter fan, but it's more because I didn't really like the format and I found it a little bit hard. But Twitter, I opened Twitter and within 15 seconds of opening it, I close it because it's just a cesspool of... It's disgusting. I don't understand how anyone can... Well, maybe far right, people and people who are mentally deluded like that space. I don't understand how anyone can even stomach it for more than a few seconds. So yeah, he totally ruined Twitter. And the irony is, when he first bought Twitter and talked about, I thought it was a good thing, because I remember Twitter blocking Trump, and I didn't agree with that. This is obviously back in his first term, when he wasn't this super crazy person that he is now. But I didn't agree with that, because kind of like, well, let him have free speech. Yes, he's a bit eccentric, this, that, and the other, but wow, there's been far worse, far more openly R-word presidents of the United States who you haven't blocked. Just because he's kind of figured out how to utilize this platform to galvanize support, you can't then block him. But that was kind of like, it was a sign of where we're heading now. It was all done, in order to pave the way for the billionaire Musk to be able to acquire this platform. And now it's just, it's like Facebook. It's unusable.
And I just felt that the only space in which we encounter that level of power is in fiction. Before the tech bros, before the Bezoses and the Zuckerbergs, I guess you had it in the 19th century with industrial barons, people who made all their money out of coal and oil and mills. But I don't know in the second half of the 20th century that we had that kind of that wealth so huge that it almost renders an individual more powerful than a government.
Well, in reality, this has always existed. I think what happened, and maybe I think James O'Brien is also aware of this. We all know that a certain nation that's being mean to the Palestinians right now, they've always yielded this kind of power. And there's certain families who sit within those nations, such as the Red Shields. Those who know what I'm talking about know what I'm talking about. And the Rocker, that record label, named after that record label that Jay-Z founded with Dame Dash, the Rockefeller labels, that family in particular, they have had this kind of Bond villain type of wealth higher than nations. And this dates back, centuries. I've got another video where I talk about the abolition of the slave trade and the huge slave payout, that's huge settlement, which was essentially 40% of the UK's GDP went to slave owners. Okay, so 40% of the UK's GDP was paid out indiscriminately to people essentially who owned slaves. And this was an astronomical sum of wealth, 40% of UK's GDP when it was at the height of empire. So think about this, UK at the height of empire, 40% of their GDP, that would amount to trillions of pounds. You can't do the direct conversion. When you do the direct conversion, it amounts to something like 20 billion, which is still an astronomical amount of money. But you have to put it in real terms as to what that wealth was actually worth, considering Britain would have been one of the richest nations on the planet at that time. And the reason I raised that is because that entire transaction was funded by two you-know-who banking families. Okay, so imagine that two you-know-who banking families had the capability to fund that payout. Okay, and the UK didn't finish paying those guys back until a few years ago. I think it was about 10 years ago. So it took like 180 years to pay that debt off. 180 years to pay that debt off. And by the way, obviously we know that no actual slaves or slave families or descendants of slaves have ever received any compensation or reparation, but the slave owners received life-changing amounts of wealth. And no doubt a lot of those people would have also belonged to these families. So it's kind of like they were responsible for making sure money was paid out properly to people. This is a part of how they've managed to successfully separate themselves in terms of wealth from the average person. Nothing's changed. So I kind of disagree with him here. I think the only difference that we have now is that you have these people who are more willing to be a face, or to put a face in front of these villains, so to speak. and we have the tech bros, so to speak, who like to use their platforms, to use their social networks, to create a profile for themselves, which they then utilize as another form of control. So they've actually seen the benefit of actually having a couple of front-facing, personas to further their influence and to further their control. But I kind of disagree with James O'Brien here. I think that this kind of level of wealth for individuals is certainly not a new thing, has always been the case.
But goodness me, the overall immigration figures have come down faster and further than at almost any point in living memory. You can, of course, argue that they were too high to start with, but if that's your problem, if that's your beef, the fact that they have come down faster and further than at almost any other point in living memory should surely have cheered you right up and given you loads of cause for celebration.
So what he's talking about here is the far-right rallies that were taking place in the UK. And I think we'll come on to the fact that a lot of these have been funded and supported by Elon Musk, who is really quite brazenly and openly tampering with the political climate in the UK, funding these kinds of uprisings and seeking more of this. I don't know what his gripe is against black people in the UK. Don't know what we've done to him personally. I'm sure he doesn't know any, but this is the dangerous kind of racism that he has. A lot of these individuals, a lot of time their racism is kind of restricted to the race of people that are within their nation, that kind of like the black people that they are familiar with, and they look, outside of that, and they don't really care, they're neither here nor there about the other black people, the foreign blacks. But he seems to have a global hatred for anybody who has melanation. So clearly his pinkness has caused him immense harm. Clearly his pinkness has caused him immense harm, because his jealousy towards those of melanated complexion seems to suggest he has a huge inferiority complex, in that he wants us all eliminated. So yeah, it's incredibly bizarre. But he's talking about some far-right rallies that took place, and I already spoke about immigration in another video. I think once again I have to do a dedicated video about immigration, and the fact that immigration isn't some kind of a charity that's being enacted by governments. Immigration is done to support businesses. It's done to support economic growth. It's done to keep wages low. It's done, and when it's done correctly, it can actually help to raise the living standards and the opportunities, the number of opportunities for people who are kind of like native to the land, as they don't have to, or there's no expectation for them to occupy the lower paying jobs, which in essence create businesses and growth, which in essence create jobs which pay more, which allow these moaning, whinging, complaining English people undeservedly to step into levels and tiers of wealth that they do not deserve. And this is the thing, they've been so used to these kinds of benefits, been so used to this, that when those jobs start to dry up and when things tighten and then they have to compete, they feel like they're being persecuted against. So yeah, anyway, immigration has been a massive target of the UK media. They've been utilizing false narratives to galvanize the public, and they do this periodically in the UK. I'm sure in any other nation, but they do it periodically in the UK. They did it before Brexit, as he mentioned there, where they create this false narrative so that people have got negative sentiment towards the EU, which in the case of the UK has been an unbridled benevolence to the UK people. The EU has brought nothing but good things since the UK joined the EU. And yet we had Brexit, and the UK media managed to convince the UK, population to leave the EU when we had no reason to. And they're doing the same thing now with immigration, trying to blame any kind of negative situation that's taken place in the UK on the presence of immigrants. This is just how the UK media works,
Then you should have been having your massive march through London 5 years ago. You should have been having your massive march through London to complain about the consequences of Brexit.
And I spoke about this before, this whole, immigrants in hotels. If you want to have a look at my other video, just talking about the fact that, these UK people are kind of like abusing these Asian workers and calling them kiddie fiddlers. Yes, that one. So have a look at that one, where they're, you know, essentially trying to scapegoat their crimes onto other communities, in this case the Asian ones over here. But the big kind of like headline there is that there's this stat that's been released in regards to the number of refugees that are being put up in hotels. And so in everyone's mind, they've got this kind of like illegal immigrant who arrives on a dinghy, and then the British government come along and they go, oh yes, let me put you in this lovely hotel. You know, you stay in the Ritz and we'll keep you here until. In reality, that is not the case at all. They're in hotels because the contract was given to a company, and that company has been paid per head, okay? Per head for every single refugee. And I guarantee you it's not the cost of rent plus food, okay? It's normally that times 10, okay? These companies who win these contracts are paid an exorbitant amount of money for these so that they can put them anywhere they like, and putting them in a hotel is the easiest thing for these companies to do, because now you've got the situation where the residence is staffed, okay? The provision for food and everything is there in terms of keeping a number of people in a single place with their own accommodation that's being fulfilled. So there's certain quotas that need to be fulfilled for the contract to be classified as being valid. It's much harder to find, you know, 100 independently let properties for those, you know, migrants that they win under this contract than it is to just essentially rent out an entire hotel. So you're looking for someone to blame for this. The UK taxpayer is going to pay the same amount of money regardless of how this plays out. I've spoken about this before. I don't want to go back, you know, over it too much detail, but that's how it works. And they just prey on the average UK resident's ignorance and stupidity in regards to how these things work, and they make people really mad. And yet no one's actually just literally stood up in Parliament or even anywhere and just explained this is how it works. This is how people end up in hotels. No one's doing that. I simply know that because I know how government tenders work, and this is how they work.
Extraordinary claims from somebody who must qualify as one of the most powerful men in the world, not just by dint of his wealth, but by dint of his ownership of what we used to call Twitter. We must have revolutionary government change. That's fine. You'll find someone at Speaker's Corner every Sunday down at Hyde Park saying something similar. It could have been Jeremy Corbyn. We must have revolutionary government change. Could have been Bernie Sanders. This really requires everyone to sort of marshal the people. What does that mean? Well, I mean, genuinely, what does that mean? To marshal the people, to take charge.
Marshal the people, I mean, that language already is very loaded and come from someone who has an apartheid upbringing. I think we know where this is heading.
Okay, bye-bye democracy. To reform the government and make sure that you actually have a government that is for the people, by the people. This is a foreign billionaire interfering in British democracy, negating and challenging sovereignty, which I thought that a certain section of our society cared passionately about, and apparently demanding some sort of overthrow.
So this, in any other frame, you might imagine if this was a Saudi prince, yeah? Same level of wealth, by the way. Elon Musk is literally that rich, you know, probably richer than a lot of them. But imagine this was some Saudi prince who was saying this exact rhetoric, repeating this exact rhetoric. So, oh yes, we need to reform. And actually they had funded the fascist far-right party, and they were plotting for the overthrow of the existing government and potentially the monarchy. What would happen with that Saudi? We know what would happen.
And then violence is coming to you. You either fight back or you die. The left is the party of murder and celebrating murder. And people on the left were openly celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. I saw something.
That is wild. That is wild. Violence is coming to you the left is the party. First of all, there's no left party. We're saying the left is the party of murder. So people who have got left-leaning ideologies are now being classified carte blanche as murderers. They're all murderers. Violence is coming for you. You couldn't get more fascist than this. People are kind of like, this went over a lot of people's heads. You'd find it hard to find a speech by AH during that period just before World War II that has this kind of rhetoric. This is extreme rhetoric. He's literally calling, demanding a violent uprising and saying, if you don't kill these people, they will kill you first. And he talks about the fact that they're celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. Well, first of all, maybe you could say I was guilty of that. They give a crap about the fact that that guy died. But, what logical person would ever, not celebrate the death of one of their oppressors? But the bottom line is, I didn't do it. I didn't incite it. I didn't create it. And I didn't even incite the environment where that should happen. In fact, it happened, like, as we know now, and this was a couple of weeks ago, so maybe he didn't know, a couple months ago, so maybe he didn't know. But it turns out that the people that not only perpetrated it were of the same political leaning as the people, or as the victim of it. They were of the same political leaning. Once again, the person who perpetrated it was a white male. And why do they perpetrate such crimes? Because they operate essentially with impunity. They have no one to answer to. Okay, just like you want Elon Musk. That's the kind of world you're creating, the kind of world where Charlie Kirk pew-pewings happen daily. You're creating that because the only people who conduct themselves in that manner are people who fit your demographic, who know it's very rare that we actually have to pay for our crimes. We can kind of do what we want. And so one day, if I'm kind of not feeling what Charlie Kirk has to say, I'll just take him out. That's how people in your demographic operate when you've spent your entire life making sure the human rights of people who don't fit that demographic are being trampled on. They realize that they are untouchable. And that's why you have this pandemic of school pew-pewers in the States always fitting exactly the same typecast. Always fitting exactly the same typecast. Why do they fit the same typecast? Have you ever asked yourself that question? Because these people feel like they are literally untouchable. And they feel like when I'm unhappy in life and I should be living a life of privilege. And when I'm unhappy and when I'm not getting the things that I believe I deserve, it must be someone else's fault. And rather than learning to work with lack, rather than learning to work with scarcity, rather than learning to overcome these things, they've learned that whenever these things aren't at their disposal, then I could just take it from someone else. Okay, so I'm not feeling happy. I feel sexual repression. I feel this, that, and the other. And you know what will make me feel much better? If I just, pew 40 people at my school, all the ones that kind of like look down on me. I'm going to pew them all because then that'll give me a buzz. That'll give me a kick. Those are the kind of people that you're creating. So when this comes full circle, as it did for Charlie Kirk, to bite you in the arse, don't look for sympathy from me. Don't turn to me and say, oh, I should be mourning the dude. I'm not mourning the dude. And if the same happens to you, I won't mourn you. And I probably will celebrate. That's just the reality of it. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to sit here and lie.
Grok, it's called, Grok, the sort of AI option that operates on X, answers your questions using its ability to sift through all of the reportage and journalism and statistics and details that are available. And they wrote, Grok, the thing he literally owns, and which is supposed to be a sort of impartial arbiter of facts. In response to a question, it wrote, based on recent reports, Charlie Kirk was killed on September the 10th, 2025 by suspect Tyler Robinson, whose online activity referenced far-right memes and fascism. Voter records show no party affiliation, but some sources link him to conservative views. Right, I'll carry on reading that in a minute.
The only evidence we have. So the only evidence we have regarding this guy is that he was either right or far right. We already know that he's a young white male. So all of those boxes that they needed to be ticked to blame it on the left, or to blame it on immigrants, or to blame it on ethnic minorities, failed. Okay, it fell on the same demographic that, I mean, no one was shocked. Let's be totally honest with you. No one was shocked.
This is me speaking now. I don't think, from what I've been following, you can make any major statements about what his motivation was at the moment. He seems to have been terminally and perennially online, and the notion of a political ideology has certainly not been established and may well never be, which brings us back to where we were last week, which is this sort of violence is awful, whoever does it.
Well, I think the political ideology would be jump to conclusions if he was brown. Let's be totally honest with you. This is the thing. If he was brown and he was Muslim, we wouldn't be questioning, well, you know, how much of a dedicated Muslim is he? Did he pray 5 times a day? Did he eat pork? Did he drink? They wouldn't be questioning any of that. It'd just be like, oh, well, he's brown, and actually we've traced his ancestry, and it seems to lead to, you know, Afghanistan or Iran or Syria or something like that, or Iraq. You know, he's a terrorist. That's what that's what they would say. There wouldn't be any question marks about it. But in the case of this suspect, oh, well, he's white. He seems to have a fixation with the far right. You know, sounds like a terrorist to me. Sounds like a pro-white or white supremacist terror. Yeah, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like white supremacist terror activity, you know, which is really, really common, but it's never called that. And so we don't have that bucket to put it into. We're not used to calling white supremacy. Every single school pupil in the history of, you know, these things happening in the United States has been a supremacist terror suspect. Every single one. And none of them have been framed that way. It's always kind of, oh, lone wolf, this, that, and the other. Balanced people don't do stuff like that. You know who does stuff like that? People who are entitled, people who are, you know, who are raised on far right ideologies, people who think that their life is worth more than other people's individuals. You know, this is the kind of people who conduct these kind of acts.
Sort of violence is disgusting, whoever does it. If he turns out to be a lifetime membership of the Democrats, the action of assassination is disgusting. If he turns out to be a lifetime member of the Republican Party, the action of assassination is disgusting. There are days when I sit here and I'm conscious of the camera. There are days when I'm not conscious of the camera, but I'm conscious of the camera when I can't quite believe that I'm having to say what I'm having to say.
And as much as I agree with James O'Brien here, just notice how white people never talk about white supremacy as a problem. You could talk about Islam as a problem. You could talk about other religious ideologies as a problem, but you never hear the framing of Christianity or white supremacy as being possible motives for a terror activity. And 99% of the time, when it comes to white people committing these kinds of crimes, they will either be one or a combination of white supremacists and Christian.
There are 2 types of people in this world. People who are in favour of political assassinations and people who are not. People who think that all political assassinations are awful and trying to use them to score political points or to make political capital is absolutely...
And I don't really classify it as a political assassination. It was someone took out someone who, you know, he's a commentator at the end of the day. I don't know if I'm strong enough to call it a political assassination.
Reprehensible, dangerous and quite possibly insightful. And there are people who don't believe that. There are people who will seize upon the opportunity to make hay from a murder because they are either lying or persuaded or correct in thinking that the murderer has certain political views. And Grok goes on. Remember, this is the thing that Musk actually owns. Melissa Hortman and her husband were killed in June 2025 by Vance Balter, a confirmed Trump voter. And then the statistics. ADL data shows, I presume that's the Anti-Defamation League, but I should probably have double-checked. 75% of US extremist murders between 2013 and 2022 were by right-wing actors. Those sources like CSIS note rising far-right threats, while Cato emphasizes overall rarity and includes other ideologies. Ideologies. That's Cato Institute. Definitions of political murders vary across studies. Relatively uncontroversial.
So, I mean, there we go, you know, in black and white, even though I think it's probably understated there, because outside of that 75%, the other 25% maybe not be far right, but I bet you they fall into that Christian bracket. Essentially, the people conducting all of these kinds of murders fall into a certain political ideology, which is either, you know, far right is just a nice way of saying white supremacist, or Christianity, or normally a combination of both. That's the most common flavor of this kind of behavior.
I mean, uncomfortable reading for people pretending that their political opponents on the left are more likely or guaranteed to engage in political violence. But again, if you subscribe to the view that all political violence is reprehensible, then it's not uncomfortable reading at all. Elon Musk himself wrote, "My apologies, we are fixing this cringe idiocy by Grok." So on the platform I own, the engine I provide, the means that we provide to allow you to get unbiased and impartial answers to your questions, has provided an answer I don't like, therefore I'm going to change it. But he's the free speech guy. Censoring.
Well, he's not the free speech guy. I think we can see this. So, you know, essentially saying he's got to do his best to make the AI, which operates impartially using data, in a right-wing fascist way when it gives you answers, which we know he's done previously. He did it with the whole South Africa thing when he was trying to, when everyone who was going to Grok was being given pro-right, anti-native propaganda against South Africa's black native population every time they asked the question of Grok, regardless of what the question was. So we know he has a track record for this kind of dishonesty and this kind of manipulation. It's got to the point where he's shot himself in the foot, because essentially what he's doing is he's running his tech into a place where no one wants it or trusts it. I don't understand how he's still associated with Tesla and they haven't fired him, because I know a countless amount of people who've sold their Teslas. Even I was supposed to get we got a new car at the start of the year, which was going to be a Tesla before he turned into this psycho that he's turned into. So I know they've lost billions as a result of his political ideology. And they seem hell-bent on allowing this moron to continue this, you know, this campaign, you know, this crusade of essentially anti-black racism. And the funny thing is no one's calling it that either. No one's calling him what he is, which is a racist and clearly an anti-black racist. They'll call him lots of other things. They'll call him an idiot and a meddler and this, that, and the other. But no, stop ignoring / gaslighting the black community. This man is an anti-black racist, and we have to start calling it. It's like they never want to call out racism, and then they leave it for black people to call out racism. And then when black people call out racism, they call us racist for calling out racism. It's like we have to call out racism because you won't do it, even though it's your own, you know, mental illness, even though it's your own psychological compromise that creates this environment where racism can thrive. You don't want to deal with it. And then you want to accuse us of being racist when we actually call out your racist behavior. This is the world that we live in.
An actual computer program, if again that's the correct vocabulary. And speaking of vocabulary, violence is coming to you. You either fight back or you die. Violence is coming to you. You either fight back or you die. Speaking to between 100 and 150,000, the official figure seems to be about 110,000 people in London. Most of them wouldn't have been able to hear it, but you can hear it now. You either fight back or you die. I mean, can I say, what's he talking about? Can I ask that question? Does anybody actually know? Does everybody know, but nobody's prepared to say it? What on earth is he talking about? When was the last time an incredibly powerful person on this planet whose politics don't seek to blame immigrants or foreigners for all the problems of our society. When was the last time one of them told you to be violent? It could be rhetorical, but an awful lot of the less pleasant reactions to Charlie Kirk's killing last week were rhetorical, and that hasn't stopped people making lists, rounding up names, agitating for them to get fired. The free speech champions marking.
And I think, yeah, even here, I like the fact that he's challenging Charlie Kirk. But once again, I like the fact that he's challenging Elon Musk. But once again, we're just not being harsh enough with the criticism here. It's not just a case of what is he talking about. We know what he's talking about. This is outright fascist language, outright fascist sentiment. This is an attempt to, galvanize the general public into taking up arms. I'm sure he's not. I don't even think he's that familiar with the British landscape, because if this was said in America, well, he probably has said in America, but said in America, this is obviously astronomically dangerous because the amount of armed people in America that actually know how to use their arms. In the UK, we don't really have guns like that. Maybe a few farmers have them, and a few drug dealers have them. Outside of that, people don't really have arms. So what does he want people to do? Kind of like pick up bricks and clubs and steel poles and go around? Because, by the way, that's been happening. People have been getting attacked more and more and more and more as a result. People could say directly because of him. In fact, one could argue that he needs to stand trial in the UK for the rise in these kinds of attacks that have been taking place in the UK, because he's directly responsible. One could easily argue that. Would it even be difficult? He's literally made a speech like you said, in front of 100,000 people, which has then been obviously recorded and televised to millions of people. When is this going to happen? Why is this guy still walking around free? I don't understand
it. The murder of a free speech champion, their words, not mine, by calling for people to be fired or worse for exercising free speech. Elon Musk addressed the British audience in Britain, albeit via satellite technology, and told them that violence is coming to you. This is the most ultimate provocation, to tell people that if they don't fight, then they will be victims. Violence is coming to... Well, have a listen yourself.
Violence is going to come to you. You will have no choice. You're in a fundamental situation here where whether you choose violence or not, violence is coming to you. You either fight back or you die. You either fight back or you die. And that's the truth.
Not hearing many boos there, if any. I mean, and to be...
You either fight back or you die. Violence is coming to you. You either fight back or you die. Now, if that's not a call to bear arms and a attempt to incite a civil war / military coup, what is? What more could an individual say to attempt to not only meddle, but literally, overtake, commit treasonous acts against the democratically elected, government of any nation? This is what he's doing here. This speech is illegal, and no one cared. No one's called for an arrest warrant. No one's called for his arrest. No one's called for this guy to stand trial for these words. He needs to pay for these words. I want Elon Musk to go to prison. That's what I want. I want Elon Musk arrested and to go to prison the next time he sets foot in the UK. And likely he should do the same thing in Germany and other nations where he's attempted to incite violence. This guy is a vile, vile human being, and we shouldn't be sitting here tolerating this kind of language, this attempt to create racial genocides and to mirror this attempt to make South Africa some kind of social prototype for the rest of the world, where he wants the rest of the world to mirror South Africa's awful, like, I mean, I think the whole world agreed that apartheid was probably the worst, one of the worst things that has happened in global history. And yet he wants to create that. He's going around the world using his billions of pounds to create that. This man, I don't even want to call him a man, this thing needs to be stopped.
Should Keir Starmer be doing more about this? But there seems to be a division among the bien-pensant or the liberal intelligentsia, or just the, you know, people who don't think that some poor fella who fell off a boat last week is responsible for the fact that you haven't got a pay rise this year. There seems to be some dispute about whether or not Keir Starmer should be doing more, should be addressing this. He's made a speech about being opposed to the co-opting of flags.
And just to be clear, Keir Starmer won't do anything. Okay, if you don't know, Keir Starmer's the Prime Minister of the UK at the moment, and he won't do anything because we all know that he has one nation's interest in mind, and that nation is not the UK. So he is obviously a massive part of the problem. And look, you're not going to get the solution from anywhere inside of Parliament. That's just the reality of it, which is why I don't engage in these political charades. This isn't me, by the way, doing this video. Isn't me engaging in kind of left or right politics. I think they're all as vile and guilty as one another. This is me just saying I can't stand Elon Musk. And I truly, truly do wish him the worst. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed or at least learnt something from this. If not, heck, what can I say? It's React Slop. Have a fantastic day. I'll catch you later. Peace.